What's up, everybody? Chester ARP Church Devotional Podcast. Clint Davis, your host. Thanks for joining us. John chapter 5. Mitch brings us in.
Cheers each winding path I tread. Gives me grace for every trial. Feeds me with the living bread.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and we're glad to be here this morning as we read John chapter 5. John chapter 5, beginning in verse 1. This is what the Apostle John records for us regarding Jesus and the healing at the pool on the Sabbath day. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool in Aramaic called Bethesda, which has 5 roofed colonnades. In these lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. One man was there who had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be healed?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me in the pool when the water is stirred up, and while I am going, another steps down before me." And Jesus said to him, "Get up, take your bed, and walk." And at once the man was healed, and he took up his bed, and he walked. Now that day was the Sabbath day. So the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "It is the Sabbath, and it is not lawful for you to take up your bed." But he answered them, "The man who healed me, that man who said to me, 'Take up your bed and walk.'" And they asked him, "Who is the man who had said to you, 'Take up your bed and walk'?" Now the man who had been healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had withdrawn, as there was a crowd in the place. Afterward Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "See, you are well. Sin no more, that nothing worse may happen to you." The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had healed him. And this was why the Jews were persecuting Jesus, because he was doing things on the Sabbath day. But Jesus answered them, "My Father is working until now, and I am working." Now, this story is one of those stories in John's Gospel that probably you've read before and heard, and it is a story of Jesus healing a man who had been invalid for 38 years. Now, whether this man was born an invalid, whether he became an invalid and lived the last 38 years of his life as an invalid at some point, and he remembered, perhaps, what once was, we don't know. We're not told with reference to this man. It seems to me that maybe this is a condition that came to him later in life, perhaps from an injury, perhaps from age or whatever unfortunate situation that caused him to be an invalid, because in John chapter 9 we are told that there was a man who was born blind. And the disciples specifically ask at that time, is it this man or his parents who sinned that caused him to be born this way? Now, if John's going to take the time to say that in John chapter 9, I think in John chapter 5 perhaps it's wise, and it's probably good. It's probably on good ground to say this guy probably became an invalid later in life, or he at least wasn't born as an invalid. But for whatever reason, we're told, we're not told or not told, but the point of it is that he had been an invalid for 38 years. Now, just prior to this, in the story of John chapter 4, the last story of John chapter 4, the official who had come to Jesus from Capernaum, his son was dead, he came in desperation. This guy was sitting by the pool, almost in desperation, because the belief was if he got into the pool, when the water came into the pool, the first person into the pool would be healed. That was kind of the superstitious belief. This is taking place in Jerusalem. Jesus has come to Jerusalem, and Jesus walks up to him after he'd been there for 38 years. Jesus says, "Do you want to be healed?" And the guy says, "Absolutely, but I don't have anybody to put me in the water. And when I'm about to get in the water, someone else steps in the water. And as a result of that, I don't have any chance of being healed." And Jesus says, "Rise, take up your mat, and walk." Right? So the guy gets up. He's immediately healed. He gets up. He takes up his mat. He walks. As he's walking away, the Jews find him and see him and say, "Well, why are you carrying your mat on the Sabbath day?" This is the Sabbath day. John wants us to understand. He says it multiple times. This is the Sabbath day. Here's the crazy thing about the religion of the Jewish leaders who are seeking to kill Jesus. And that religion is this. Jesus healed a man who had been an invalid for 38 years. Now listen, they had walked by that pool every day in and day out, for years. Are you telling me that they didn't know this man was sitting there and who this man was? Or they couldn't find someone to testify to the fact that this man had been an invalid for 38 years. He'd been sitting by the edge of that pool for 38 years, hoping to get in and get healing. And now all of a sudden, this guy's walking around. Surely they would have known who this was. But they're not interested in why he's walking. I mean, the story of the day, right? This is the glaring elephant in the room, to use that idiom, is this guy who was an invalid for 38 years is now walking, and all you're worried about is whether or not he's carrying his mat on the Sabbath day? Like, that's what your focus is on? The minute detail of carrying your mat on the Sabbath day? I'm not saying the Sabbath day is not important. I'm not saying that the practice of resting on the Sabbath day isn't important. Indeed, it is. But what I'm saying is, in comparison to the fact that the invalid for 38 years is now walking around, it is a minor concern. Like, you would think the natural reaction is, oh my goodness, you're walking around, right? What happened to you? And the guy's like, I don't know what happened. Why are you carrying this mat on Sabbath day? They ask him. He says, hey, man, the guy told me to get up and walk, told me to carry it. I got up and walked, and I said, you know what, I'm going to carry it. Rightly so, as would you, right? Later he finds Jesus. Jesus finds him and says, you're well. Go and sin no more. This guy goes back and reports a testimony, right, as the woman at the well, as you and I are called to do, goes back and testifies to the fact that Jesus is the one who heals him. And they say, well, you're breaking the Sabbath day. You have violated the law of God. Now, the purpose of the Sabbath day law is to bring restoration. You work for 6 days and you rest on the Sabbath day. It's for rest. It's for relaxation. It's for connecting us with God and renewing our spirits for the work week ahead. Right, and preparing us for the week ahead. Right, their first day started on Sunday. Their Sabbath day was Saturday. If Christians, ours is on Sunday, the first day of the week. But it's 6 days you shall labor. And so the point of the Sabbath day is restoration. This guy is a living, breathing example of restoration. His body's been restored. His spirit has been restored. His relationship with God has been restored in Jesus Christ. He is a walking demonstration of the Sabbath rest, and they missed it. Oh, friends, let's not miss the work of God because we're worried about minor things or because we're worried about things that don't fit within our own paradigms. And I think that's an important point. We all have that temptation, not just the Jews, but all of us struggle with that temptation. So may we look to see the work of God, and may we be like the man who was healed. Get up and walk because Jesus said get up and walk, and tell people, this Jesus is the one who healed me. You guys have a great day. God bless you. Let's focus in on Christ, and let's not miss his work. See you soon.
You carry me close to your heart, and surely your goodness and mercy will find